Both.
There we are.
Here we go.
Recording in progress. Good luck, everyone. It was nice knowing you all.
Well, hello. Should I introduce us or start us off?
Yeah.
You're the host.
I'm the
Yeah,
host.
you're the hostess with the mostess.
Okay, welcome today. I have Lauren, who has been on the channel before, and we have Israel, who we invited to come. He has an interesting story, and just felt like it'd be perfect for us all to join and listen and share.
Thank
So
you, Casey.
Israel, welcome. We're just gonna let this flow. We didn't have any sort of agenda.
Except I kind of have an agenda.
Lauren
All right.
I kind of have an idea because I've heard your story. So I kind of have like
Okay, what's your idea?
Yeah, my idea, if you want to share. Well, Israel, do you want to tell us a little bit about you first? Like, who are you? And like,
Who am I? I like it. Yeah, it's a very broad question, isn't it? Who am I? Oh gosh, where do you start with a question like that? I'm me.
well, let's see.
I imagine you want
here.
more detail.
What about, let's start with, so we can start with Israel. Israel is a teacher for the spiritual pathway, way of mastery. Yeah. But let's start with like what got you there. So I want to hear about your life as a child.
Okay.
Truly.
All right. I was born in 1977 in a town called Red Hill.
For the listeners, let me just give a excerpt of why this is interesting. Like, this podcast will be about addiction, about learning your own intuition and learning to trust that more than anybody else's advice outside of yourself. So his childhood is really interesting, of like when all this started. So that gives an excerpt. You want to start there?
Yeah, I can start there. I think on the surface, my childhood and my life was very normal. Having spent kind of many years now hearing other people's stories as a therapist and welcoming that expression from people to be heard. My story in comparison, when I look at my childhood, it's like, well, this is really normal, and there's nothing really that jumps out that says like, there's something there that really needs attention. Although I think everyone's upbringing has elements that require attention. What I was acutely aware of, I think, from a very young age, was intense sense of tension in my system. For example, by the age of kind of 5 or 6, I'd ground all of my baby teeth down to these tiny little stubs from just grinding my teeth in my sleep. And I used to bite my fingernails right down till they bled. Every day I'd just be gnawing on my fingers. Like there was something in me that was, crying out, I suppose, looking back, crying out for attention, the loving attention. And I kind of grew up in this field of confusion, which I think is kind of very common. My parents are lovely beings, but not well equipped to raise a human. I think, as I look at myself as a father and think, well, how well equipped am I? But we do our best, don't we, as parents, and they did their best, and that was very beautiful. There was love, although it wasn't always understood how to express that with any clarity. And I think I was difficult. I think it's difficult to see your children struggle, and I was struggling. I was obviously struggling, with these things happening, with this deep core tension. I had a kind of fascination with suicide and death, and not wanting to be here, and it proved to be a difficult experience for me growing up.
Didn't you tell your mom when you were really little, like, you didn't want to be here?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that came up, at a young age, that I didn't really want to live. I'd rather have died. And of course, there was no context for this. There was no there was no abuse happening. There wasn't anything that you could say, it's understandable. There's a context for this experience. There wasn't a context for the experience that I was having. And I found that deeply confusing growing up. And it wasn't until years and years later, actually, that I started to unpack, through looking at the journey of my soul, as opposed to the journey of my incarnational self or my personality self, that I began to understand what was happening for me. But there were certain events that took place in my life that propelled me into seeking escape from myself primarily. Although I'm sure for many years in my journey, I thought I was escaping my mother, but that wasn't true. Sorry, Mum. The fact of the matter was that I was trying to get away from myself. And I think from the age of 12 or 13, I got very interested in alcohol and drugs, particularly kind of LSD. I think was it's very interested in this kind of psychoactive drug, that took me out of myself, really. I think essentially I found something that could help me not be me, for a period of time, and that was a wonderful relief. It's just like, thank you, God, for bringing me something through which I can find a way to not experience myself as I experience myself. And of course, it's so confusing. I think in teenage years and growing up, it's desperately confusing, especially if you don't have anyone within your environment or within your network of relationships who has some keys or can shine a light on a pathway that can lead to some sense of self-evaluation and self-reflection. It's deeply embedded in a field of perpetual victims.
Will you share about the time that you were the physical therapist? That was, like you said, the first time that someone offered help.
Oh, yeah. That was around self-harm. I took to cutting myself from about the age of 8. I think I remember stealing a little fruit knife from my grandmother's house. It was a little small knife with a serrated edge. And I don't know what inspired it. I just felt, I think it was inspiration. I felt inspired to start just rubbing it against my arm, and it was like, well, actually, this feels pretty good. So I continued to do this, and then would use various implements. I remember doing it with a stud key for my cricket shoes, this little key for taking the studs out, just like rubbing down into the flesh and drawing blood. And that for me was a tremendous expression of release and relief. Actually, I always felt a great deal of light flood into my body. Although at the time I had no context for what that was or why that was. I just knew that it was good in some way. And I also knew that it was bad in some way. And so it was always a conflicted experience. The actual action of it felt good. And although I wouldn't do it too regularly, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, it would alleviate the feeling of intense emotional overwhelm, I think would be the right expression. I just felt like in some way I was holding all this stuff and I didn't know why or what for. I just had a sense that I was experiencing life in a way that was different to the people that I saw around me. And it was kind of hard, I think, especially at that young age. But cutting myself was a huge relief. And I remember I had an injury where I dislocated my kneecap playing cricket, and I was in physiotherapy at the local hospital, and the physiotherapist saw the cut on my arm, and she knew. I mean, she knew that that was a self-inflicted wound. It was obvious in so many ways. And she asked, she said, "What's that?" It's like, nothing. I caught myself on some barbed wire. But of course, that wasn't true, and she knew it wasn't true. And she just said to me, I remember I was lying on the floor doing an exercise, and she said, do you need any help? It's such a wave of emotion with that. Feels like what a different journey it could have been for me had I said yes, in a way. I think I was about 11 years old, something like this. But I was so full of shame at the time, because that was the pattern of the behavior. It was to cut, feel better for a short period of time, and then feel deeply ashamed of that pattern of behavior. That I said no. I said, no, it's fine. I'm fine. Classic denial, really. But yeah, I remember that very well. I remember the kindness. I think that's what really struck me. There was a real kindness and compassion in her, which wasn't uncommon. I had kindness and compassion in my life. There were, I would say, good but very misguided people in my life. Have you lost me? Am I there?
I did for a second, but now you're back.
So yeah, that was, I suppose, a choice point. One of those choice points, of which I'm sure we're all very aware of those coming up in life. That left me isolated. There was an opportunity for connection. There was an opportunity to actually discuss and talk to somebody about what was happening. Equally, kind of looking back in the beauty of hindsight and having gone through the journey that I've gone through and uncovered what I've uncovered, it's been like, I don't think that would have made that much difference, to be quite honest. I'm not sure that a therapist at that time in my life would have necessarily been able to root out what I know has needed to be rooted out of my deepest mind. I think there may have been some tools given and some empathy and support, but it certainly wouldn't have cracked the nut, we might say, that needed to be cracked in time. So yeah, that went on for years. The cutting that left me, I think, in my mid to late 20s was the last time that I did that. So yeah, it was just a part of this wider coping strategy, really, of learning to live with what felt like insurmountable emotionality and suppression and control and guilt and terror. The human condition, right?
Yes, I was going to ask you. So you had this intense pressure inside that you were aware of.
Yeah.
Do you still have it now?
No, not at all. I think there may be elements, there may be threads, that run through, but no, nothing like that.
Well, tell us what happened, what helped you, because I know
So-
that's everybody's going to want to know.
Yeah, and you got on LSD, so when you were like 13, so then
Yeah, I spent a few years playing with LSD in quite an involved way, say, and experienced what I experienced. and was a drinker. I mean, you know, alcohol for me was this wonderful thing. Oh my God, you know, it just, and combined with the LSD, it left me behind and allowed me to be who I wanted to be, you know. Like I didn't imagine at that time that I had a choice about it, you know. I needed a lot of help to get out of who I was, you know, and experience myself as someone else. And I generally enjoyed who I became, and for a while, you know. But the drink and the drugs have a way of eroding through the goodness in personality and finding the darkness over time, and that certainly happened. I mean, I had a pretty heavy relationship, I think, with the alcohol over many years. The LSD dropped away merely because I became absolutely terrified of it, and I became terrified of my mind on it.
Well, do you want to tell us, before you went to India, do you want to tell us about like what scared you with the LSD? You started thinking you were crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I think for a lot of my 20s, you know, I didn't trust what was being said or what I was hearing or what I was seeing. It was a really confusing time. You know, I like, somebody could be talking to me and I wouldn't be 100% sure if they were talking to me. And then they might not be talking to me, but I think they might be. And then I try and respond, but I never quite knew whether to respond. It was like the fabric of my reality had kind of, I'd lost trust. I'd lost trust in the fabric of my reality, through, I think, a lot of LSD exposure, and just being caught in moments where it was unreal. You know, what was happening wasn't happening, and I was responding in a way that was a bit strange. And I did that a few times and got really embarrassed and freaked out by myself, and then just kind of lived in this little bubble of thinking, like, I'm really fucked up. Like, I'm really, you know, I'm very lost. I'm scared. Alcohol seemed to be the only comfort I really had, and smoking dope. But I became kind of entangled in this web of not knowing if my reality was real, and being very afraid of that, because it translated for me in quite a profound social anxiety, I think, of just not feeling that I could relate to people, because I didn't know if it was real, or, you know, what I was hearing or seeing was real. I think a lot of it was just a mental thing, but I thought I was mentally a little bit ill. But I was terrified of disclosing that, so I didn't disclose it to anyone. I just kept it to myself. But it was a real terror of entering into a system that I didn't want to be a part of. I didn't want to get help. I didn't want to get medicated. I didn't want to become a part of that. So I just kind of, did my best, got drunk and smoked a lot of dope.
And then you said that, so you go to India kind of hoping that you would die, right? Or thinking
there was a part of that. I mean, I was watching a lot of my friends who were going to India. It was a very well-worn path by the time I went. A lot of my friends were going there and coming back with really serious heroin addictions. That had never really been my path. Heroin in India is very cheap and good quality. And the opium there is excellent quality as well, and reasonably cheap. And so these were at the time, and I don't know what it's like now, but at the time it was a well-worn path. And I was terrified of going to India. I don't think I was terrified about becoming a smackhead, to be quite honest. I was terrified about losing my mind. I was terrified about cracking, you know, and not being able to cope, and becoming completely unhinged from reality. That was my terror, was that I would go to India and I would kill myself, I think. And that was a terror, and there was also an attraction. You know, it was like, oh, sweet relief, what, you know, that'd be so good. And it had always felt appealing to me in some way. I think until only quite recently, to be quite honest, have I held secret and not so secret aspirations to commit suicide. And that has lifted from me, and those voices from deep within my own mind have become integrated into the love that I am and the truth that I am. So that, yeah, before I went to India, I was terrified, but I looked at my life, you know, and I could see, the horizon of my life as it was, and it was a dead end. You know, I was working in a care job that was great, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I didn't necessarily want to do that. I was just going through the motions. My whole life had just become one long going through the motions. It was just like, is this it, you know? And I looked at the horizon and I thought, if I stay here, I'm going to kill myself in 6 months. I know that. If I go, at least there's a spark of hope. At least there's something, you know. And if it happens, and if I go out there and I don't come back, then so be it. But at least I try, you know.
So you go to India and you live outside the bar, right? In a tent. Is that what you said?
Well, no, I traveled first up to Rajasthan and Pushkar. I met a friend of mine, and we smoked a lot of chillums, and that really didn't help my mental state at all. And then I got down to Goa and did some of the party scene and stuff like this, but I wasn't well, you know. I wasn't a well man in my mind or my body or my heart or my soul, you know. But what India provided me with was cheap alcohol. You know, India was the first time that I looked at my money and I could go, my God, you know, there's no limit. You know, before there was always a limit to my drinking because of the money that I had. But India took that limit away. It was just like, you can just go for it. You know, you can just drink and drink and drink, which I did. You know, I drank and drank and drank and smoked dope, but mainly I drank for about 6 weeks, I think. It's a bit hazy, but I drank and drank and drank every day, all day. And you know, learned a thing or two about the nature of alcohol in a persistent and excessive way on the nature of mind. But then there was a sequence of events. A very wonderful woman called Jane gave me a homeopathic remedy on the beach, which I knew nothing about. She just felt, I think, divinely inspired to give me this remedy. And then a friend of mine took a young boy, maybe 8 years old, on a moped ride to the neighboring town. I had no idea that my friend was on a lot of Valium and vodka on that day. He was off his face, and they crashed, and it was nasty. It was really nasty. And that was a big experience. So those two experiences, I don't know, in some way catalyzed something in me. And I continued to drink, but they had an effect. They had an effect. They knocked me. I was rocked in some way. And I woke up one morning and I went and I sat with this couple, and I was still drunk from the night before, and I got a beer from the fridge. And I sat with this couple who were on their honeymoon. And I'd always had like this kind of psychic, some kind of psychic thing. I could understand people in some way. And I started using it in a really dark, twisted, malicious way. Without even really noticing it, but I was enjoying it on some level. I was enjoying manipulating this couple on their honeymoon to start not liking each other. And it was really ugly. And I just remember kind of seeing myself as if I'm above myself in some way, looking down. And I remember seeing myself and being absolutely repulsed. I mean, I was disgusted with myself. I mean, absolutely just repulsion. It was just like, oh my God, you are hideous. It's just, you know, and this voice came into my mind, you know, and said, is that who you are? Such a good question. And I said, no, it's not who I am. And the voice said, is it who you want to be? Is that who you want to be? And I said, no. They said, what do you need to do? And I said, I need to change. And that really was, it was an intervention. You know, that was an intervention into my life by, you know, whatever you want to call it. You could call it God, you could call it creation, my higher self, my soul, whatever it was, you know, I'm eternally grateful. But it was obviously the right time. It was just pinpoint perfection, the right moment. And I got up from the table and apologized and walked down to the end of the beach and signed on to the yoga course that was starting in a couple of days, I think. And I stopped drinking that day. And I didn't touch a drop for 7 years. I went back to the bar I was staying at. I ordered a glass of milk. I was like, what's going on with you? It's like, don't matter, just give me a glass of milk, you know. And then a friend of mine walks into the bar later on with some guy called Tony, lovely guy, and he just says, oh, I need to teach you Tai Chi, you know. And I'm like, what's the catch, you know? Deeply suspicious of this man telling me I needed to do his course. It's like, how much? You know, who are you? What are you doing here? And he introduced me to the I Ching. I don't know if you know the I Ching. It's a Chinese oracle book. It's a wonderful, powerful, beautiful book. And he said, well, if you don't trust me, trust the I Ching, you know. And I threw the coins and we did a reading, and it was so obvious. It was just like, yeah, I've got to do this, you know. So then within a matter of days, I'm doing like 3 hours of yoga in the morning and 2.5 hours of Tai Chi in the evening and teach Qigong. And I did that for like 2 weeks. The yoga fell away. It was wonderful, but it wasn't for me. But the Tai Chi and the Qigong was just, I just knew this stuff. It was just like, oh, I get it, you know? I think about a week into that, I took my roll-up tobacco out of my pocket and threw it in the bin. And then that was it. I'd quit smoking.
I have a question. So did you experience like withdrawals or anything, or was it just like this? You just felt fine?
I felt fine. I felt really, really fine. I mean, I felt better than fine. Wow. I felt great. I felt almost euphoric. But what I'd done was I'd replaced what I was doing with this high energy work. You know, it's like you guys know what it's like to do hours of yoga, right? You know the impact of that psychologically, emotionally, physically. It releases a lot of endorphins. It's a high, you know. So I got high on Qigong while I was learning the Tai Chi. I got high on Qigong. I got high on Qi, which was amazing. It was a great experience. And I made a promise to myself. I said, right, I'm going to dedicate as much time to this as I used to getting off my face. You know, it just felt like that's what I'm here to do, you know. And I did. I spent 3 years, solid practice. I mean, solid practice, hours every day, you know. And as for withdrawal, you know, I ended up on 2 occasions being desperately sick, with high fever in India, and then once coming back from India. And I just knew that I was like sweating out from the core of my organs toxins that I'd been programming into myself for such a very, very long time, you know.
Didn't the nurses come in and they were checking on you and you're like, no, I'm just with God or something?
Yeah. God was in the white tiles in one experience in the hospital. There was these white tiles, and I was just fixated on this tile. It was just like, it's God is in this tile and beaming love at me. You know, I'm fine. Everything is just flipping awesome. You know, it's amazing. It's so good. Oh, yeah.
Also,
yeah.
Well, do you want to share more about that, or do you want to, what came with?
I was just going to say, yeah, go on.
Tell us about so you were learning so much Tai Chi that your teacher was like, how are you learning this stuff? Like, how do you know this stuff? And the woman told you a Chinese man was following you around?
Yeah, that's how I met my guides, I'll share this because I'd like to share this part of the story because it feels important in some way. I spent like 3 years doing this Tai Chi and Qigong stuff, and really, really, really applying myself in a profound way. And I developed a real arrogance and superiority. I did. I really thought that I was better than just about everyone else.
Oh, God.
It was like anyone who wasn't doing what I was doing was just a fool. And it's so simple. You just need to take some breath and like this, and you're smoking cigarettes, I just became like this empowered judge, of everyone and how unworthy they were in comparison to me. I maybe exaggerate a little bit, but it had that flavor to it. There was definitely that energy there that I was better than. And I think that it's a part of the journey. I get it. It was birthed out of my deep sense of unworthiness that I hadn't tapped into in this framework of my life yet. But what happened was I ended up getting a motorbike in India when I was in the high Himalayas in Ladakh and riding that about. And I had an accident or a couple of accidents and I hurt my foot twice. And I phoned up my friend who was in Goa, Natalie, who had a Reiki center there. She was running a healing center in Goa. And she kind of asked me, it's like, why do you think it's the same foot? Why do you keep hurting the same foot? And I'd never heard such a ridiculous question. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, I hurt my foot. You want me to think about it? But I came back down to Goa and she gave me a Reiki healing. And it was the first experience I'd had of energy healing. And at the end of it, it was very beautiful. But at the end of it, she looked at me and she said, how do you actually feel about yourself? And of course, that just in some way pierced the bubble, it's just like, boom. It's like, and I just started crying and sobbing. And it was just like, oh my God, I actually feel really, really bad about myself. And that opened up, the next phase of my journey, which was after 3 years. And I kind of collapsed into myself and this big arrogant persona that I created and was bluffing around the place and making myself out to be the next greatest thing, collapsed quite viciously and violently inwards. But I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that question because it propelled me into what I needed to look at, and what I was quite blissfully unaware of. It's very true. Ignorance is bliss. I was in a very blissful state, but I was profoundly ignorant of the depth of wounding in my being that was calling for me. I mean, it's always wonderful to look back at these points, these moments. I love the Chinese talk about the yin will. It's like you have the yang will, which is this, right, let's go and do it. Let's make it happen, and they say, well, the yang will's all right. You don't see the yin will till you look back, and you look and you see. And I see that those moments, those really important moments, those really pivotal moments were never birthed out of the yang will. That was never my doing. It was always something that I had to allow to happen in life. And I allowed that healing to happen, and I allowed the question to settle and burst my bubble around my heart. And that was very beautiful, very, very beautiful. And yeah, that led to me exploring more around Reiki healing and oh God, there's just so much to say. I mean, Is this interesting, or is this?
Yeah.
When you talk about, just because one of my favorite parts of the story is when you met your guides, the woman that told you a Chinese man was following.
Yeah. It's really sweet, isn't it? Gian.
Gian is this guy.
Yeah, Gian was a woman from England who was
Oh wait,
traveling.
no, Gian's not the
Yeah,
guy.
no. The guide is Ying Zhao.
That's
Yeah. Well, I was practicing a lot of Tai Chi and Qigong, and I met this woman, I just saw her, she's a wonderful woman, in probably her mid to late 50s, I think, an English woman who'd had an extraordinary life and was a very, very well-trained spiritual medium channel. She was brilliant. And old school, like old school trance channeling taught, I think at the Arthur Findlay College in the UK. She really knew her onions. She was great. And yeah, she approached me, and didn't know what I was about too much, but very kind of gently was saying, yes, you're doing the Tai Chi, I see. And have you noticed that you've, kind of progressed a little bit further than your teacher? And I was like, well, I don't know about that. She goes, oh, you have. And I was like, well, maybe. And she goes, yeah, you have. And do you understand why? Do you know why that is? And I'm like, well, no, not really. And she says, well, there's a, have you noticed the Chinese man that's following you around? And I was like, what are you talking about? I think I'd notice if there was a little Chinese man following me around, It was her way of introducing this spirit guide, one of my guides who she introduced as Ying Zhao. And Ying Zhao means eagle claw. But he's also a being called Yang Zhaohu, who is a part of the Yang family Chinese lineage. And he's a big teacher in spirit. He teaches many souls in the Chinese arts. So yeah, he taught me essentially Tai Chi and Qigong. He would come into my body at times and do the Tai Chi. And we'd go through the form and it would just be like, oh my God, this is amazing, and he'd say, now you do it. And then it would take me like 6 months of practice to get to that point. And then he'd go, okay, next 6 months, we're gonna learn to move through emptiness, which is one of the last lessons he gave. And I'm not the best student now with Tai Chi, but it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful practice, moving through emptiness. I'd love to. Anyhow, I could talk about that for ages and I won't, because that's another webcast.
Is he still your guide? Is he still one of your guides?
Yeah. I still work with him.
Yeah, when we've talked about him before, and he was asking him something, and to me, you'll start to look like him.
I know. I honestly, when you were just talking about it, it's like you morphed.
Yeah, he does.
And I was like, what the heck? My mind's doing playing tricks.
He will. His whole demeanor will start to change.
Yeah, like a little.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I've got a photo of him if you want to see.
Yes.
And
Let's
then
see if that's who he was turning into.
Yeah, it will be.
It's so funny, me and you.
I know. Well, when I saw the photo, I was like, that's him.
Oh yeah,
It's him.
the mustache and everything. That's crazy.
And then this can weave into, Casey may have a different direction. Do you want me to go with this, or do you?
I like you taking the lead. I'm following you. Listening.
Well, I guess because I've heard this story. Tell me. So this can kind of weave into what you do now, because you ended up doing a session and she let you meet all your guides. And do you want to share about that? And then
I'm gonna get tea while we're talking.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah. Gian did a mediumship reading, channeling for me, where several of the guides came in. It was an incredible experience. I'll never ever forget it. It was in a little room in a beautiful old hotel in Pushkar in Rajasthan, a place I absolutely love. And just like you were talking about there, she went into this and she changed. I mean, you know, her physical appearance changed, everything about her changed. Her capacity to allow spirit to come into her body was phenomenal. And she spoke about, you know, my guides, you know, saying there's you know, 7 guides, 6 main guides and 1 master guide. And I was like, you know, I actually got to know them through my own journey and practice, and they all have different teachings to give, which is beautiful. But the master guide, the one that they're all kind of training underneath, would not say who it was at that time. It just, I said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am one of many," which was beautifully enigmatic. But of course, further down the line, I know that that's Jeshua, and that he was always taking an interest in the journey that was unfolding through me.
Wait, hold on, it's beeping on here.
I don't know what that noise was.
I don't know. I don't think it's mine.
The volume down.
I've got it coming through my headphones, and my volume is right down on my phone. So, yeah.
Like a hammering sound.
There we go. What was when we were talking about Joshua?
He's probably making cabinets again. You know what he's like. He does love his, you know, he's up there making trinkets to sell at the market. The Christ Council market on a Sunday morning outside church.
So you said you asked him who he was, and you said that, oh, well, the other guides call me master. That's what.
Yeah, they called him master, and he said he was one of many. I said, "Who are you?" You know, and there was actually, there's like this conference going on. They were debating whether to tell me who it was, but they decided not to. Much to my chagrin, I was like, "Oof, God, you know, come on, I can deal with it." But I don't think I would have really been able to. It wouldn't have been right for me to connect with him and his energy and the story of my soul and the lineage at that time. I get that. I really get that. Yeah.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
I have different listeners from all sorts of backgrounds. And if they don't know about spirit guides and what that is, does everybody have them? Can you connect? How do people know for sure? In any of those questions that you feel to answer?
Yeah. Well, you know, I can talk from my experience and from my belief. What I suppose, in a way, what I choose to believe. And I certainly don't want to come here and say that it's true for you, because that's not where I want to come from. But I can talk about what I believe to be true for myself. And, you know, within the framework of that, I believe that there are many unseen helpers that connect with everyone on this planet, and love, you know, really deeply love each and every one of us, with tremendous persistence and unconditionality. And I believe that these beings are no different to you or I. They're not better than or separate necessarily from us. They are souls, I think, on their journey. I imagine that there have been moments in my soul's history where I have been in that role, loving those close to me, those that I love from a distance, through the veils. And I think that these beings who are not different to us can take on certain roles and agreements. You know, my understanding is that there's life before life on Earth and life after life on Earth, and that also there's a degree of consciousness brought to that. I know that there's some wonderful work that past life regressionists have done. Past life regression is a process of hypnosis in which people can learn about their past life experiences as a soul. And these past life regressionists started taking people between lives and asking, well, what's going on? And then people were in their soul embodiment as consciousness, talking about their previous incarnations and their hopes and aspirations and their dreams and desires for the current incarnation. It's like there's nothing arbitrary happening here. There's something very purposeful about the journey that each and every one of us is on. And from my perspective and in my belief structure, in my story, that purpose plays out very clearly. And there's this long journey of the soul through many incarnations, and we all help each other to experience what we want to experience in order to learn, in order to touch upon certain frequencies of energy, in order to grow and become more conscious here as well and embodied. So I think that yeah, spirit guides are not an exclusive thing. I think they're extremely prevalent, and I think that anyone and everyone has the capacity and the ability to connect with them. I would say, in my experience, the most debilitating thing that we can have to stop us from connecting is the idea that A, they don't really exist, and B, we don't have the ability to connect. I mean, you know, what we say is in many respects. So if I go around saying I can't connect with my spirit guides, then that will be the reality for you. And it almost seems too simple, but just to change that statement into I can connect and I will connect with my spirit guides, can propel self onto that journey, and with persistence and intention and clarity, that can become a lived experience of connecting with those beings.
Yeah, just the desire, just saying I want to connect with my spirit guides opens the door.
Yeah, it certainly opens the door to opening the door.
Well, do you want to like speak anything if they can't, like, unless you invite them in, they can't like make you listen or
Intrude.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're very insistent upon honoring our desire and free will. I mean, that is paramount to them as the deepest, most loving movement that they could make, is to honor that. And it is. I mean, to allow a being to do exactly what they want is loving.
Yes.
You know, it is. They can advise, steer, but you know, if you've come here for a certain experience and you've signed up for that experience, they're not going to get in the way of it because it's hard. You know, right. They will encourage you through.
Yeah. Another question I have, and this is going to switch back to what we were talking about earlier. Yeah. You said you quit drinking for 7 years. So yeah. Did you start drinking again, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, tell me about
that. I did. Yeah. I quit drinking for 7 years. I didn't touch a drop, not a drop. And that didn't even really feel like a challenge, to be quite honest. It just felt like, this is what I need to do, and this is what I want to do. And I think because I had what I would call like a foundation or a platform of practice, of spiritual practice, in the form of the Qigong and the Tai Chi, that enabled me to lift and consolidate and ground myself in a way that actually felt good. That I was able to do that. And I think that was really important in that. But I also recognized somewhere along the line that I was giving power to this substance. And that if I abstained always, was that a fear-based decision? You know, was that love speaking? Or was that fear saying, this substance has a power to control you in a way that you cannot resist, or that is dangerous to you? And I didn't want to live under that. I didn't want to live in in a life where I believed something outside of myself was more powerful than my choice. And that was very clearly the guidance, and so I have drunk. I have been drunk since then at times. Sometimes I've enjoyed it, sometimes I haven't. It's been rare. And I could feel at times the pull and the draw of the alcohol in my system and on my mind, and the old habitual pathways, that are there. And I always felt a choice with it, And I think that as I've got older, hangovers are just so much more difficult to deal with, And now I might have a glass of wine, I might have a whiskey. I love whiskey. I love the flavor and the taste and the feeling. So, if I'm on my own, I might have one whiskey a year. But it feels like mastery, I had the same thing with LSD, where I was terrified of it, but Jeshua somehow brought LSD into my life. And
that's going to be a shocker for people like from a religion. That's
right. They're gonna be like, no, Jeshua would never.
Well, Jeshua wants me to be free from fear. That's what Jeshua wants. Jeshua wants me to live a life that is free from fear, and I think he wants that for all beings. Like, what would it be like to live a life that's free from fear, where nothing is denied or resisted or avoided through fear, but rather we come to a point of choice and discernment, where we can listen to the heart in truth. Because fear just clouds everything. Fear is like walking through a fog.
Wait, hold on.
Hold on, we're lagging.
Yeah. All right. Are we there? Are we there?
Now we're there.
I was going to say something. So do you think that fear is like a universal human experience, to experience fear as a human?
Yeah, I think it is until it isn't. I think, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, yeah.
Oh. Do you think that you'll, even as you, grow and develop and you have a spiritual path, that you might still feel the same way fear felt previously, but you can hold it more, where it doesn't control you like it did in the past? Like, because I used to have this idea that being completely free from fear meant that I would never feel that feeling again. And so I was always, if I even started to feel an inkling of it, I'm like, oh, only love is real. And I would try to make it go away or control it, and somehow mentally thinking that this is not God, this is opposite. But for me, what has been the doorway is to feel it more and just surrender, soften into fear rather than resisting.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. A lovely description of healing. I think that there's something about fear of feeling that dictates a certain resistance to the experience itself of fear. And of course, the fear. What is fear, really? I suppose, in one sense, fear is the absence of love, and so, learning to bring love to fear and embracing and enfolding that fear is very powerful. I think it gets tricky, in my experience, kind of from what I observe in myself, when there's a lot of identification with the fear or the story that's creating the fear, and there's a lot of fusion between the consciousness and a past experience that's kind of projecting again into the future, so there's this kind of, I suppose, layers of self, and I think that there's something very valuable to be said for being able to just relax out of the experience in order to be able to return and enfold it in a loving and relaxed embrace. But that's not easy to do when there's a lot of identification and a lot of giving away of power into the world, through a sense that there's a belief, that the self doesn't get to say what is experienced. But yeah, coming back to what you were talking about, fear comes up. Absolutely. I feel fear. I experience fear. What do I do with it? What I do with it now is very different to where I would have been with it even 6 months ago, I think, or a year ago, certainly. There's that movement to acknowledge that it's there because I have created it. I think that for me is the fundamental truth that within my experience needs to predate any further movement in my mind. It's like, I'm afraid. Well, the only reason for that is because I've created that in myself. And immediately I reclaim the power. I draw back power from the world. I draw back power from my mind. And then with that power, I can create again. And I can use it to love what's there. And I think that becomes easier and easier the more it's practiced. So we open up new routes through the mind. We have neuroplasticity, and the more that we practice something that actually works for us. And I think that's really key, is that this works for me. It might not work for anyone else. It doesn't really matter to me whether it does or it doesn't. And we all find our way.
Well, and to acknowledge, I don't know if this was clear, because I've seen you in process before. You do fully feel it. Like he'll emotionally let out that rage or the tears or whatever, and in the midst of that, reclaim.
Yeah. Oh yeah, feeling is absolutely essential. I think I kind of visualize it when I'm looking at these things, like there's a core creative element to experience, and that's like the nucleus of the atom, if you like, and then around it you've got these swirling fields of emotion that have been generated, and then to get to the core, like often there needs to be the movement through the feeling. And it's almost like I know what I'm like. I'll feel and feel and feel, and I might cry and cry and cry until I get somewhere. Like there's a sense of having gotten somewhere, and it's like boom, there it is. It's like I've hit the core, the nucleus. It's like, what is it that's there? And sometimes that needs observance and dialogue, and inquiry, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just dissolves with the energy that's being brought to it. I think that in a really annoying kind of way, I think that the more I've explored in myself, the less methodical things come. But there are methods and ways. But it's just staying open and attuned and listening to what is being called for in body and mind. And I think in a way the healing just happens from that attunement, I suppose, to love in yourself.
Just a
Keeps
minute.
pausing.
Yeah, froze for just a minute.
All right.
If you have anything from there.
Let me just feel around inside and see if there's anything. Mm. I feel like we can, at least, we should have done this at the beginning, but talk about, we've heard your whole life, Israel, and I would like to explain what you do now.
That's your favorite question.
Yeah, that's my favorite question.
Practicing.
Thanks very much, Casey.
This is a good
Oh
opportunity.
my God, look at the time. I had no idea I talked for that long. I really must be getting off now. What do I do now? It is a good question. It is a good question. I think there's lots of different avenues. You know, I suppose in a way there's a big umbrella. You know, there's a big umbrella of, I suppose you could call it spirituality if you wanted to. And within that, there are threads of desire within me. Right now, I'm creating a product of sprays, actually, essential oil and flower essence sprays, which I'm really enjoying. It feels like a lot of fun. It's kind of alchemical process of blending liquids and then infusing them with sound and light and color, music, and it's really enjoying that process. So I'm creating three main sprays to start with. One for grounding called Holy Grounded or Holy Ground, and one for the heart and one for the crown, and then you're going to blend those together to make something called alignment. So I'm excited by that. I've just started studying somatic sex education, which I'm really enjoying, actually. I think, you know, kind of overall in my journey, there's been this profound spiritual energy that hasn't really fully learned how to ground and be here yet. You know, and I think I'm just learning that in myself, how to be who I am here. You know, I know how to be who I am there, and I can feel the authority that I have in heaven, but on earth, and joining that up and bringing that here, it's like, that's my learning. You know, that's my deep learning in this life. I channel the Christ lineage as a channel and a medium, and I've done that for many years, which has been an epic journey in itself. Of learning trust and how to interrupt the denial of my mind. I have in the past offered sessions to people in which I connect and just allow flow to happen, although that's kind of just drifted away, and I'm curious to know if that wants to come back in some way. I think it certainly will in the future with somatic sex education, and we'll see how that is. I have another desire to train in becoming a death doula as well, and helping people at end of life care. So there's these threads of energy of exploration for me at the moment. I would say there's nothing really truly grounded right now in the midst of that. Apart from maybe the channeling is probably the most grounded thing I do in terms of actually extending into the world at this time.
Also, can I share like an example? If somebody wanted to go through, say, the Way of Mastery course, you have taught that for the last 6 years.
Yes.
So you have been doing
I somehow overlook that, don't I?
Yeah, so, and all that's recorded, so somebody could have access to.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, yes. That's all there. You know, I've been teaching with my good friend and housemate Sarita for 6 years, the Way of Mastery with a group online. So we have an extensive library of webcasts and channelings and some incredible offerings through that, and that's all there as well. So yeah, thanks for reminding me what I've been doing for the last 6 years.
How would someone find that, Israel?
They can find me on Facebook. Or they can go to wayofmasteryonline.com and sign up there and gain access through a membership portal to the library.
And if someone right now wanted a channeling of Jeshua or the Christ Council through you, are you offering that to people?
I will ask within for guidance. Yes.
I love that question.
I've been resisting this for such a long time.
And the reason I asked, just to make it clear, is they've asked him to do this, and he, but it's something that he.
I have been exercising my right to say no.
Yeah.
And yet, when I tune in, there's such a clear yes. So yes, if people want to experience whatever connection with Jeshua or whoever, I don't just channel Jeshua, I channel many beings from the lineage, and they come through as they see fit, depending on what frequencies are most desired in that session. But yes, if people feel a resonance of wanting to experience that, then they can contact me, and I will move through my resistance and denial and turn up at the session.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I mean, I feel the same way. That really resonates with me. I have the podcast and I have a YouTube but I've the most grounded thing I've done is just be a mom and, taking care of the house and stuff like that has been my work, in which it's great work, but you don't get paid for it. So
yeah, it is great work. It is. I'm a dad, part-time, but I have my son half the week, and I know the value of that. Yeah, it's amazing and tough too. Challenging.
Yes.
Repetitive.
It really is. But I think this was good. This was good. I'll just have you, before I post all this, send me your information to put in the show notes, and
Sure.
in case anybody wants to do a session or hears this and just feels like they need to contact you for whatever it is that you offer.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm really open to joining with people. And what I like to do, I suppose, really is just stop and breathe, and encourage and invite people to join in that, and then allow and see what happens. I think often the focus of what I do with people is to help people feel, because I have a very open feeling channel that just allows movement of emotion and feeling, and I think that's so valuable. And softness, I bring a degree of deep softness that is helpful at times too. So yeah, if anyone wants to join me in something, you're very, very welcome.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's
all
powerful.
right.
It's powerful to meet with another in in an open space, especially if you're someone who's even if people aren't on any sort of path, like they're on a self-improvement path, or they're starting to dip their toe into learning about these things and spirituality, and they're interested. It's great work to do it on your own. Like, you can self-heal, but there is power in the joining together and having just two consciousnesses, there, and looking at whatever it is that needs to move and help each other share energy.
Yeah.
I did Israel and I met one time and did that together. And I do tons of work on my own, and I'm a feeler too, and I feel like that's part of my job, is to help people feel. And I have a lot of tools, but it was still powerful, especially since you're like a masculine presence too, is different And so I don't know, but it's really good. And a word that people use now is like an empath. And I think that's what you tune into is the empathy skill of being able to feel the energy of the other person and help them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, I think, and it is more powerful when we come together and join. There's no doubt about that. And it's not always the right thing, but it is sometimes. So
Yes, it is.
yeah, so if anyone wants to join with a soft, masculine, big bearded energy, and you laugh and cry for a little bit, I can hear and listen and share and join and surrender.
Well, thank you, Israel, for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know that I'd be sharing all of that, but it's nice to have the opportunity to, and it's nice to be heard. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, well, we'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.